Welcome to a short webinar on Nolan Invoice Approvals for Dynamics GP. Today we're going to look at the Invoice Approvals module, which is a subset of our eRequest Invoice Approvals system. When an invoice is entered or imported into GP, it can be scanned physically using a scanner to create a document, which either in a document management system or can be held on a shared location on your network. Today I'll also show you how we can drag and drop something from an email into that folder and label it correctly so that it's linked to your Dynamics GP invoice transaction. The invoice is routed based on value or supplier class, or the account or department that you're coding it to. Based on the rules that you've set up in the system, it can be routed either to a user set up in eRequest. That user doesn't have to have a GP license because they're just using the eRequest portal, or it can be set to be routed to a group of users. So as we set up groups, we can set them up in hierarchies. And what we generally do is we ask three questions. So how many users in the group are needed for approval? What's the complete approval limit, and what happens after it's been approved? So as an example, I might send an invoice to a group called checkers, and there might just be one person in that group whose job it is to check the invoice, make sure that it's been received, make sure it's correct. In that case, that group would be set to one user needed for approval. I'd set the complete approval limit to 1 penny, meaning that actually any invoice over a penny would need to be routed on. And what happens after approval is it would be sent to the parent group for approval. That parent group might be a head of department. Again, maybe just one user in the head of department role would be required for approval. Maybe they'd have complete approval up to £5,000. What happens after approval? It might be sent up to the directors. So if that invoice gets to the head of department, if it's less than £5,000, it would be marked, once approved, it would be marked as completely approved and able to be posted in GP. If it's over £5,000, it would then be routed up to the directors, where we might set the options there to say 2 directors are required for approval. It's completely approved up to 250,000, and after that, the directors must choose who it should go to, which might be the CEO or the chairman of the organization. So let's go and have a look at how the module works in practice. I'm going to go first into my Outlook. You'll see I've got a folder here of incoming invoices, and I've got an invoice that's come in from a company called BT Business Direct, and it's the document number is IN 037 25369. If I open the attachment here, I can see that it's for a dual corded headset, and the value of the invoice is £514.32. So I go and enter that into GP. I go into GP. I go into purchasing, go into transaction entry, and I've got a voucher number here, voucher number 621. If I put in this is for a headset for consultants. I've already got a batch, which is my initials and the date. That's the notation that I normally use, and today's date for the invoice date. I look up my supplier, BT Business Direct, and I need to put in their invoice number, which is IN 037255369, and the value of that invoice, £514.32. Works out the VAT for me, and if I look in the distributions, I see it's being posted to my accessories consultancy account 300-6510. I've got some rules set up in the system. That means that if I have a look at the e-request approval up here under the additional tab, I see it's been routed based on an approval rule called consulting to my consult admin group of people. So why did it pick up that rule? Let's go and have a look at my approval rules. If I open up the window and we're going to have a look at that rule, I can see that the parameters I've set for the rule is if the invoice is between £50 and £10,000 and the division on the account is 300, then I want it to go to the IA Consult Admin group of users. I've set that group as the default so that it defaults immediately on the invoice, which is useful if you're just importing invoices in. It'll automatically just assign that group to that invoice. If I'm putting it manually, if I want to change it later, I've told the system also allow me to choose perhaps the cost center manager group or an individual, so I could select Andy Seymour as a particular individual who can approve this invoice. I set up my rules as in a hierarchy. What I normally do is I set number one type rules as specific. So a specific example might be any invoice over £2,000 and below 100,000 from Bloomington needs to go directly to Pam Taylor for approval. So Bloomington, I know I book venues and accommodation from. I should never book anything more than £2,000. So therefore, if I do, I want Pam to know about that and approve it. I've got another rule here for British Telecom, my telephone bill. If it's greater than a penny, so basically any invoice from British Telecom less than £20,000 should go to Catherine Walsh for approval. And Catherine runs the admin team here at Nolan's. Moving on to type level 2 type rules. This is where I set up my cost center rules. So anything admin, i.e. where the division is 100, should go to Catherine because she's head of admin, consulting, contract services, development, etc. have their own individual departmental rules. So the invoices can be routed successfully to the different rules, to the different users. So back to my invoice approvals. As we saw, it's going to default to consult admin. I could also, because I've set up in the rule, either send it directly to the cost center manager or to Andy Seymour if need be. So how about the scanned image of the invoice? Because this invoice has come in via email, what I can do is go and grab that attachment and I can just drag it into my network share here. And it comes in and it's called attachment.pdf. And what I can do here is I can just put in the voucher number that Dynamics has allocated to it. So it's voucher 000621. And then back inside Dynamics, I can go to additional view scanned image. And directly from inside Dynamics, I've got access to view that particular invoice. If the invoice was a paper invoice and I needed to scan that in, I could do exactly the same. I could just scan it in and rename it, or optionally I can print out a barcode from inside Dynamics. Inside the barcode number we put in the voucher number. So as that invoice is scanned, the barcode could be read and saved inside our folder with that name using a little bit of OCR technology that reads barcodes for us. Either way, the invoice is now held on our network or inside our document management system and available within GP to view that invoice. We've also seen that the invoice is now ready to be sent off to our consulting admin team for approval. So I'm going to save that invoice. On my home page inside GP, I've put a couple of smart lists in so I can see I've got 10 invoices requiring approval. If I just drill down into that smart list, I can see here's my voucher 621 with the consulting admin team waiting for approval. So this in effect becomes your chase list. You're able to see where invoices are and who they're with waiting for approval. However many times a day you can set up a job which will email the users within these groups or the individual users to tell them they've got invoices to approve. Typically we set that up for twice a day, that we email the people and say you have an invoice to approve. We also give them a hyperlink on the email to allow them to get directly into invoice approvals to approve it. So the consulting admin person needs to log into eRequest. So let's have a look at the eRequest module. The admin person is Leanne. So I'm going to log in as Leanne into Nolan Business Solutions. And Leanne gets a page for invoice approvals, and we can see there's our voucher 621 here. She's also got another one here from John Deere that she needs to approve. By drilling down into the detail, Leanne's able to see the document number, the voucher number, PO number if there was one, transaction amount, who the supplier is and the document date, and the due date for it to be paid. We can also see down at the bottom the distribution where it's been assigned to. Gives the option to either see or enter a reference down here. I should imagine that probably one of the first things Leanne would want to do is have a look at the invoice. So we have a view invoice button here. That pops up our invoice for our headset. If Leanne wants to make some notes, because she's the admin person here, she can add notes onto this to say, checked. It did arrive and allocated to Trudy. Okay. So at this point, if Leanne's happy, Leanne can go through and approve this particular invoice. And it tells us that the invoice has been submitted for further approval to the Consulting Cost Center Manager and disappears from her list. Next time that the job runs to send out emails, the Consulting Cost Center Manager will be notified that there's an invoice awaiting their approval. And in this case, this is Andy. So Andy logs in, and he's got 3 actually here waiting for his approval. And here's our voucher 21. So Andy can go in, take a look at any notes. See at 1553, Leanne said it was okay, and then approved it. And he could make his own notes if he wanted to, but he's just going to approve it here. And because Andy has an approval limit of £5,000, and this is well within the limit, the invoice approval has been completed. Back in Dynamics GP now, if I refresh my homepage, my require approval will go down to 9, and my invoices approved has gone up to 56. So I can take a look at my approved invoices. and I can find my 621. Here it is here, and I can see that's been approved. I can see in the notes section all the notes of what's happened. So Trudy said, Leanne said it did arrive and Trudy's got it. She approved it. Then Andy approved it with a note saying okay. I can also see inside e-request approval that it's been approved here. The third thing that's happened is that it's taken my batch and it's appended a _APPR at the end. Now that's flexible. You can set that up to be to change it just to approved, and it'll put an approved batch. You can set it up to be prefixed or suffixed around the original batch number. So you could set it up to APPR CS1907 if you wanted to. By changing the batch, it means that your purchase ledger team really just need to go in at some time during the day, look up any approved batches, i.e. those with an APPR at the end. Go in and post those batches because we know they've been approved. If the supplier phones up asking if it's been approved, they might phone up Andy. So if we go back to our e-request portal, Andy can also see what he has approved previously. So we can see there the invoice is now under his approved list, and by drilling down to it you can see all the information. He could also see the applies. So once this invoice is paid off, he'll be able to go into the applies window and look at the document number, document date, and the applied amount of what's been applied through a payment or a credit note. So thank you very much for your time today and allowing me to show you the Nolan Business Solutions Invoice Approvals module.